Hello, I'm Tarek Basley and this is Downstream, the week's top stories from the world of science and technology on Al Jazeera. This week, the $200 drive-by-eye kit that could help paralysed patients keep moving. Kenya's project to open up learning to all using cheap mobile phones. New tunnelling technology for the wet and sandy soil beneath Amsterdam. And clues about the origin of life from a dinosaur cemetery in Argentina. But first, a move by the British Parliament to back a controversial in vitro fertilisation technique. The procedure uses DNA from 3 people to create a baby. Its aim to prevent a range of incurable illnesses by stopping mothers from handing down defective genes to their children. But the technique is not without its critics.
Liz Curtis passed on a mitochondrial disease to her daughter Lily. She died of heart failure when she was less than a year old. Liz has faulty mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondria give human cells their energy. They've been compared to a cell's battery.
I think one of the worst things about a mitochondrial disease is not only being told that your child is going to die and there's no cure and there's no treatment, it's just wait and see, but then to find out that subsequent children are more than likely going to be affected in the same way, it's just really, really tough.
The new treatment can break this desperate cycle. Its pioneers insist it's safe, but controversially for some, it involves DNA from 3 people. The mother donates an egg fertilised with the father's sperm. It has a healthy nucleus which contains the vast majority of inherited characteristics. But the mitochondria which surrounds this nucleus are faulty. It's that which passes on the problems. In the new technique, this healthy nucleus is placed into a fertilised egg from a donor which has healthy mitochondria, interrupting the inheritance of disease. That's why it's sometimes called 3-person IVF. Opponents of the treatment, including the Church of England, say it opens the way to genetic engineering and designer babies. Some scientists and politicians argue that not enough testing has been done to see what other effects it may have, and that the UK risks rushing into unknown scientific territory.
I think altering the genes of a child, creating a new child, essentially opening the way to determining the type of person who is born, is a very difficult ethical boundary to cross.
Politicians discussed the unknown risks of the treatment, but they also understood that on the cutting edge of science, taking a calculated risk when the possible benefits are so clear is sometimes necessary.
The eyes to the right, 382. The nose to the left, 128.
They voted overwhelmingly in favour, and the first child under this treatment could be born as early as next year.
Well, here on Downstream, we like to see people doing ingenious things with simple, often cheap technology. And here's a story about one such innovation, a wheelchair that's controlled by the movement of the eyes. It's a creation of a British scientist and costs just a few $100s. And it could revolutionise the lives of those with disabilities.
Steve has been seriously ill for 5 years now. All he can move are his eyeballs.
I have motor neurone disease, so gradually it has taken over most of my life. I need round-the-clock care just to breathe.
This is how Steve talks. This computer tracks his eye movements and turns them into a voice, but that's it. He cannot physically move himself.
I have tried foot controls, but can't manage them. Earlier in my life I was capable of controlling an electric wheelchair, and it's very different being able to move myself around without having to book a helper.
So could this transform Steve's life? From a lab nearby, a creation you could call revolutionary. An electric wheelchair which moves solely by following the user's eyes.
Again, I look to the right and we move right. I look to the left and we move left.
There's no doubting this is a prototype. Spot the sticky tape holding it together.
The camera system to measure the eye movements we just got off the web. The vice that holds it was just lying around the lab. And this thing, the wheelchair, we got out of a skip.
But all of this comes in at a little under $200.
What's fascinating here is not so much the technology itself, even though eye tracking is pretty phenomenal. It's the way in which it's been implemented using relatively cheap equipment that any of us could get hold of if we really put our minds to it. And what all of this does is it opens up the possibilities for millions of disabled people all over the world who ordinarily would not be able to afford this kind of kit, creating a new market known as frugal healthcare.
You don't have to learn to use a technology. So you don't have to know where to look to do what. You just look as if you were normally looking when you're walking around or driving around, and we're translating this normal look into the real world. And that turns out to be a lot cheaper than existing user interface technology, and that was never done before.
This is the start of a long journey for this project, many doors to go through before it can be brought to market. But the fact that it's been achieved so cheaply and by a team solely reliant on donations shows where the future could be heading. And with it, those who otherwise would not have been able to move anywhere.
Well, some remarkable ingenuity there in that report from Phil Lavelle in London. We'd love to hear from you if you have any suggestions of technology or science stories we should be covering here on Al Jazeera. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at Tarek Basley or make a comment on this post. Well, still to come this week, picking apples, how sales in China are driving the world's most profitable company. And the father of the laser dies, aged 99. We take a look at how laser technology has changed the world. Now, though, some of the other top technology stories of the week. A Chinese government report has given us an insight into internet access in the country. It says there were 649 million internet users at the end of 2014, up 88 million on the year before. And most of them, 557 million, are using their smartphone to access the web. The report said rural users are lagging behind those living in urban areas, and it's this sector the greatest growth is expected. The US Federal Aviation Administration has taken the unusual step of encouraging commercial development on the moon. In a letter to a technology company, it said it wants to see private sector investment and would let them operate on what it described as a non-interference basis. This has been interpreted to mean it would give exclusive rights, including the right to mine the area, if a company can land and find a way to prospect for minerals on the moon. And scientists from Germany and Japan have developed a magnetic sensor so thin, strong and flexible it can be placed beneath the human skin, even in the palm of the hand. The team says the technology would give the recipient a sixth sense. It would allow them to perceive the presence of magnetic fields in much the same way some birds and sharks use magnetic fields for orientation and navigation. Well, this week we saw technology giant Apple set a new record for corporate profits. It made a monstrous $18 billion last quarter, more than any other publicly traded company in history. And it seems sales of its bigger iPhone 6 in China are helping to drive profits.
The launch of Apple's iPhone 6 last October was met with unbridled enthusiasm. The device's larger screen was a departure from past iPhones, but if sales are any measure, a welcome one.
How many Apple products do you have in your household?
Quite a few. 2 iPads, 5 iPhones, that's 7.
Why do you love Apple?
Because it's so streamlined and very simple.
It's quite foolproof. If my 65-year-old father, that's a Dinosaur, can work it, as well as my 11-year-old brother and sister. It's a good product.
Apple CEO Tim Cook describes the demand for the latest iPhone as staggering. 34,000 of them sold per hour during the last quarter of 2014. That's nearly 75 million altogether, driving corporate profits to a whopping $18 billion.
Apple products remain incredibly popular in the United States. With every new product launch, customers line up outside the flagship store here in New York. But it's growth in China that's behind these record-setting profits.
In the last year, Apple went from 6th place to the #1 seller of smartphones in China. Sales grew 70% and are now almost on par with Europe.
Apple was helped by the fact that they sealed a collaboration with China Mobile, the biggest mobile service provider in China. And they just started working together. So actually, we expect Apple to do even better going forward.
Overseas markets are seen as crucial to Apple's continued growth as U.S. markets become saturated and more people access the internet via smartphone.
China's critical because it's the biggest growing market, the biggest number of potential consumers for Apple. This is the first quarter that Apple was the #1 smartphone vendor in China, and that's a huge feat, given the competition over there.
Apple's latest success comes as another technology giant, IBM, announced it is cutting 118,000 jobs worldwide.
To Kenya now, and an innovative project which is using cheap mobile phones to make learning accessible to thousands of students. It's called Ineza Education, and for just a few cents, the service offers students information on just about any topic.
We normally dial *291#.
This is no ordinary lesson. These students are using mobile phones to access information which will help them with their studies. The service is called Ineza. Students can do a quiz based on the syllabus and get feedback. They can access an encyclopedia and even get live help from a teacher.
Ineza is popular in urban areas like Nairobi, but it's had the biggest take-up in rural areas like the northeast of Kenya, where children have much more limited access to schools, books, and other educational tools.
The team behind the service is constantly looking for ways to make it better. The co-founder is 25-year-old Kago Kagichiri. He says he feels overwhelmed by the company's success in just a few years.
Studying can get pretty boring, as most people know. So, to hear that there are kids who are like hiding under their blankets and like studying all night, or when I'm like developing and seeing on the server that the students at 3:30 in the morning were studying, it feels pretty cool.
You multiply by 20,000.
These students attend Red Rose School in Kibera, Nairobi's largest slum. It's thanks to an NGO that they have access to these mobile phones.
We've been having our own internal exams, and I've seen the trend, especially in science subjects. You see like percentage increasing. So personally, I feel it has really improved the grades of these students.
Education analysts say there's huge potential in innovations like Ineza.
If well structured, if proper training is provided, if all the enabling factors are in place, there would be real benefits to reap from the use of mobile phones as a teaching tool.
Find the area of the
Kago and his team plan to reach millions of students across Africa. Such innovations in education are racing ahead, and many say in order for children to really benefit, it's going to be up to political leaders to catch up.
It's years behind schedule and massively over budget, but the rails are now being laid along the length of a new metro line under the Dutch capital, Amsterdam. The project saw the line being cut through soft, wet soil and forced engineers and tunnelling experts to develop new techniques. Well, recently I was in Amsterdam and took a look at the results. It's one of Europe's historic train stations and the busiest in the Netherlands. And over the last 10 years, an extraordinary construction project has been going on beneath it. Tracks are now being laid 6 years behind schedule, and the finishing work on the station is well underway. But building an underground railway line through soft, wet soil hasn't been easy.
We had to excavate a complete canal under the station. And of course we had to take over the foundation of the station, which is also built on wooden piles. And 3,000 wooden piles had to be cut down. And then after the canal was built, we could float it in, bring it under the station, hang it up, and then immerse it to this depth. So this was really extreme engineering.
Work was suspended midway when shops and homes above sank. It eventually resumed, but the cost of the project has now ballooned from under $2 to more than $3.7 billion. It was always going to be a massively ambitious project, a 10-kilometre train line beneath a city built on stilts and arranged around canals. Throughout the project, engineers have had to come up with new and innovative techniques to bore, seal and finish these tunnels. The digging also unearthed more than 700,000 artefacts from the city's past, allowing archaeologists to rewrite its history.
They felt from the hands or the heads from people and they said, oh, blimey, I lost it. But what they lost is our treasure. So we have a completely new entry on the official history and the objects. They are connected with daily life.
There are plans to put some of the artefacts found on display in the stations. But for now, the focus is on the finishing work, with the first trains on this long-awaited and costly line due to run the year after next. Well, barely a week goes by without reports of hacking of one form or another. The illegal accessing of government data, the defacing of company websites, or attacks on IT systems. So how do those working in the cybersecurity front line see the threat? Well, this week, Talk to Al Jazeera spoke to former digital poacher turned gamekeeper Jason Moon.
The cause of the problem the fundamental caveats of the security technology that we employ today, those need to be changed. I mean, we're still using the same technology today. You know, internet technology and all that, the way it actually works hasn't really changed since day one the internet was invented. You know, I'm sure we can all put our heads together and come up with some system which is safer, more secure. You know, I use online banking. They force you to do these incredibly ridiculous convoluted password combinations. You know, you can't remember that kind of thing. You have to write it down. Most people write it down on their computer or email it to themselves or have a Word file with their passwords, and you have to because you can't remember these things. We need to get away from that system. So, you know, we need two-factor authentication. We need a secure fob or token-based or biometric systems. There are other alternatives out there, but it's probably going to take a horrible attack to make people start thinking, you know, we need to use something else. And we have to have the sort of digital 9/11, the digital Pearl Harbor event before people sort of really sit up and take notice. So unfortunately, that's obviously what's going to happen.
Well, you can see the full interview with Jason Moon on Talk to Al Jazeera on our website. Well, the man credited with inventing the laser died this week, aged 99. Charles Townes shared the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1964, 10 years after he made a prototype of the first device. The idea of creating a pure beam of shortwave, high-frequency light first came to him in 1951, apparently while sitting in a park among blooming azalea flowers. He began work on the idea, and in 1958, Bell Laboratories patented it. Using the technology, he was the first scientist to detect complex molecules in space and measure the mass of the giant black hole at the heart of our galaxy. Lasers have since transformed our world, reshaping science, medicine, telecommunications, and entertainment.
They're so built into the bedrock of our technology now that it's very hard to imagine what life would be like without them. The very fact that I'm able to talk to you now is relying on optical relays where electrical signals are converted to light and back again so they can be transmitted around the world. And you know, there are the trivial things like laser pointers or the scanners in supermarkets, but they're used, the number of ways of kind of creating this very coherent, super pure light that goes right back to the basic quantum mechanics of how electrons orbit around atoms and how they bound to atoms and how they give off light when you stimulate them. That's laser is light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation, and it's the stimulation of making atoms kind of all at the same time, all in concert, emit light, and that gives you these really fine pencil beams that are really easy. They can be very monochromatic, all the same colour, and they can travel long distances. Things about lasers is the huge range of power that you can have. So a really, really delicate laser for eye surgery, or tiny ones in a DVD player, for instance, just tiny little lasers. But yeah, there are even lasers so big. There's one in Oxfordshire down the road from here, but they concentrate energy so much that people are trying to initiate nuclear fusion with lasers, and that's a really powerful laser. You concentrate the energy so much that you force atoms together, and in the end, the hope is you get more energy out than you put in from that. So the range of applications is just enormous, from the very, very fine, delicate stuff to the kind of sci-fi, super powerful ones as well.
And finally, scientists in Argentina have made a discovery that could help us better understand the evolution of the dinosaurs. The fossils date from 230 million years ago and come from the western province of San Juan.
This is the Valley of the Moon. Haunting, secretive, enigmatic. Several dinosaur remains have been discovered here, including one of the oldest so far, the 228-million-year-old meat-eating Eoraptor. This, millions of years ago, was the bed of a huge freshwater lake, the cradle of life. It's revealed in fossil form some of its secrets, including the oldest dinosaur ever found. But it still holds many, many more. Now, the same paleontologists who found the Eoraptor have at a nearby site unearthed 113 fossils representing 12 previously unknown species. They're much smaller, none more than 5 centimeters long, but no less important than the always dramatic dinosaur finds.
They are all unknown species that don't yet have names. We know they're related, some of them to known species. They are cousins with something in common, similar anatomy, but they're not the same.
The researchers believe the remains were brought to an 800 square meter site in this region by predators, forming a kind of animal cemetery. It may seem barren now, but 230 million years ago, this place was teeming with life. And it's in these rocks and in the earth beneath my feet that the experts are hoping to find the answers to some of the mysteries of evolution, the secrets of life itself. Dr. Martinez and his team hope the find will help them understand the relationship between different animals and plants and their environment at a time before dinosaurs dominated, before what is now Africa and America separated.
Finding new species is what motivates us. It's our holy grail, to uncover a whole new site. But this is just the tip. The hard work starts now.
It's slow, laborious work. These rocks do not give up their 230 million-year-old secrets easily.
Well, that's all I have for you this week. I hope you'll share this video and have a look at the Al Jazeera English website, aljazeera.com. You'll find all our previous shows there. You can also follow me, Tarek Bazley, on Twitter @TarekBazley. Thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.